Gannibal is a series that I never really expected to get such a massive following. It's a low-key horror manga with a lot of great moments and twists here and there, and the huge lore and backstory around the characters just make the drama and mystery so interesting and compelling. For months, we've been following this series, and today I want to go over all of the 14 volumes of the series, starting with Volume 0 and going all the way through Volume 13. If you've been watching the series since the beginning, no, this isn't a re-upload. I'm just giving you guys a special Christmas gift to thank all of you for sticking with me and the channel. For those of you who are new to the series, you can watch the entire thing all in one go, and for those who have stuck by, have not just part 5 but also a special one-shot to look forward to.
But if you guys want to see more anime content like this one, then why not go down and hit that subscribe button.
And so without further ado, Merry Christmas everybody, and let's get on with the special. Volume 0 is a special 31-page one-shot to celebrate the release of the live-action J-drama. The TV show has some great reviews and even airs on Hulu and Disney+, with a season 2 on the way. The one-shot opens up with Takeru Kawaguchi being interrogated by the police about a murder. During the questioning, one of the officers point out that Takeru's child was given to Jin Goto, yet Takeru has maintained a good relationship with the Gotos. This raises the question that why would he commit such a violent act? The story flashes back to Takeru's life in the village. He's walking with his mother and his wheelchair-bound father when they come across a Goto member harassing a villager with his crew. The Goto member approaches Takeru, but he diffuses the situation by apologizing for disturbing them, and the group eventually moves on, though Kisuke, one of the Gotos, glances back at him. Takeru's father had always insisted that he protect their family, a duty that he took very seriously. Until the very first major arrest involving the Gotos. The incident was sparked by the murder of Kano-san, a former police officer that confronted the Gotos. Fearing that this crime would disturb the fragile peace of the village, Takeru grows increasingly anxious during his interrogation. At this point in his life, Takeru lived with his mother and took care of his father, who was often very hostile and expressed a very strong desire to die. Takeru is haunted by the memory of giving his own child away to Jin, a decision that weighed very heavily on him. When his father mentions that Takeru's wife leaving the village, Takeru snaps, shutting him down and promising never to abandon him or their village. The following day, Takeru becomes consumed with thoughts of his child, and while walking through the village, he hears a gunshot from a nearby building and rushes in, only to find a group of villagers casually discussing the upcoming festival and the children preparing for it. Takeru realizes what they were talking about and it enrages him. He lashes out, but the villagers retaliate, pointing out his own hypocrisy for giving up his own child. However, they then realize that it wasn't actually him who made that decision, was it? Back home, Takeru confronts his father, demanding to know the truth about his child's fate. Before his father can answer, his mother steps in, admitting that she was the one that handed over the child to Jin. Overcome with anger, Takeru strikes his mother, prompting his father to plead for him to stop. His father tried to rationalize it as just another Goto family act, but Takeru vows to put an end to their influence once and for all. The night of the festival arrives, and the villagers gather to celebrate. Takeru appears with 2 toolboxes, raising suspicion. When a villager calls him out, Takeru is prepared. The story cuts back to the present, where Takeru confesses to the police that he shot up the whole festival. Rather than remorse, he describes feeling liberated by his actions. The one-shot ends with the revelation that the officer interrogating him is none other than the main character, Daigo. I don't know exactly where the one-shot takes place in the actual story, but the flashback definitely takes place before Volume 1, before Daigo enters the village. The one-shot would be pretty confusing for readers who don't know anything about Gannibal. However, I tried to summarize it in a way so it becomes less confusing and more interesting once you guys actually get into the first volume. For people that have been caught up with the series, this one-shot is a little nice reference book. I like the little cameos, I like the little dynamic of the main character, and just for a mixed canon / filler one-shot, it was actually pretty enjoyable. But now, let's get into the actual meat and bone of the series and get into the first volume. Cannibalism is a topic that I never really expected to talk about on this channel. But the idea of it has been around for so many centuries, and it's still seen in the modern era. It's become such a popular subject that many TV shows, movies, video games, and yes, even anime and manga have covered it a lot. Recently, a horror series called Gannibal has become the talk of the town for adding a unique twist on the cannibalism genre. The series has gotten so popular that it even got its own live-action adaptation on Disney+, with a season 2 already announced. So today, we're going to dive deeper into why this series is so popular and what makes it better than any other cannibalistic series out there. For over 200,000 years of mankind, there has existed a culture of cannibalism. Even still, it exists in certain places in the world, perhaps even a Japanese village. But surely not in this village though. A new police officer named Daigo has just transferred from the city to Kuge village. While some residents are welcoming, most see him as just an outsider. His wife, Yuki, and daughter, Mashiro, often visit him at work, as the village is certainly quiet. They enjoy the peaceful life but remain vigilant. Daigo is determined not to meet the same fate as his predecessor. The story is that the last officer had a huge debt from gambling and disappeared, saying weird stuff like the villagers are Before he could finish, a call comes in. They said they found a body. Daigo climbs up a hill with a rowdy long-haired hunter named Kisuke, who teases him about his agility. They eventually reach a gruesome scene, the mauled corpse of a Goto family member, most likely killed by a bear. Kisuke vows to hunt down the bear, but Daigo notices something odd. The corpse has a human bite mark on the arm, positioned in a way that makes self-infliction impossible. When Daigo points this out, Kisuke gets defensive, accusing Daigo of suggesting Goto family abuse. Tensions rise, and Kisuke pulls out his shotgun, aiming it at Daigo's head. The other hunters in the family encourage Kisuke, but Daigo quickly apologizes, and Kisuke reveals that it was just a practical joke. Although the hunters laugh, Daigo isn't amused. Still, they invite him and his family to join them for drinks later that night, emphasizing the importance of building a good relationship with the villagers, something that the last officer failed to do. Daigo and Yuki argue about him going out drinking, but he ultimately joins the hunters, lying that his family couldn't make it because they're visiting Yuki's hometown. The hunters see through the lie though. Everyone in the village knows what he does and when he does it. Meanwhile, Mashiro sneaks out in the middle of the night as Yuki, realizing they're living in the last officer's house, notices a carving on the wall, saying, "Run away." At the bar, Daigo discusses the rumors the last officer spread about the villagers being cannibals, which the hunters laugh off. Elsewhere, Mashiro wanders alone on a snowy road and encounters an old man with a cart filled with chopped limbs and a bloody finger in his mouth. The hunters plan to hunt down the bear in the morning, warning Daigo to be cautious. When Daigo returns home, Yuki shows him the eerie carving. He checks on Mashiro, who is safely asleep, but has a splash of blood on her. She wakes, and hands him something that shocks him to his core. The next morning, Daigo joins the hunters on the mountain, but a young hunter named Yusuke lags behind, not wanting to be left with the outsider. Kisuke emphasizes that the mountains are hunter territory and doesn't like it when outsiders interfere. While getting lost in the woods, Daigo receives a call from a pathologist named Nakamura, who reveals that the finger Mashiro found doesn't belong to the woman, but to someone else. Suddenly, a shot rings out, missing Daigo. It's Yusuke, who initially fired to get Daigo's attention. They encounter the bear, which attacks Daigo, but Yusuke kills it with a single shot. Kisuke and the hunters celebrate, and Daigo is no longer seen as an outsider. They dissect the bear, confirming that it killed their grandmother, and Kisuke demands Daigo to eat a piece of his grandmother's flesh as a sign of respect. At that moment, Daigo realizes that the villagers are indeed cannibals. Already in just half of the first volume, so much stuff has occurred that I literally had to split these into 2 parts. I really enjoyed this part of the volume. I love the family and the mystery around this entire town. The art is very high definition and the artist loves to work with shades. It definitely helps out a lot when designing the different characters like Kisuke. A majority of the backgrounds don't even look like drawings. The backgrounds look like pictures taken from real life, which the mangaka Masaki Ninomiya stated were drawn by combining various photos he has taken, but since he doesn't have much reference material, he draws them all on his own. Daigo is an interesting main character. He seems really nice and the way that he handles situations is very realistic. Daigo being an outsider is actually inspired by the mangaka's real life experience. In an interview with Manga-splaining, Ninomiya states that the feeling of being enclosed exists everywhere. Whether you're in the city or the courtside, I entered a company in the city made up of only locals, and they treated me like a proper outsider. The foreign entity entering any completed environment has it hard regardless of era and place. Daigo and his family are really wholesome as well, but like I said before, it's also really realistic. Him and Yuki fight, but nothing that would impact their love, which is a pretty small detail, but it just shows character. The townfolk are very sketchy, but I feel like they're a little bit too sketchy. From the beginning we knew that the story was about cannibals, and the different implications across the chapters show that the villagers are not what they seem. The villagers are clearly cannibals, but it could just be something that they wanted to get out of the way quickly. Or they could just be trying to misdirect us from the bigger twist and mystery. I say this because the final scene with the eating of the grandmother's flesh isn't as bad as you think cannibalism is. When you think of eating people in the media, they usually go over the top with it. However, here they're practicing cannibalism in a way to pay respect and mourn the dead. In the 1500s, cannibalism was a way to mourn the dead in a way we do funerals now. They would eat the bodies as an act of affection or to mourn. Obviously, now the practice has been completely demolished in most areas. However, I feel like the village still does these practices and one cannibal has just taken it too far, aka the old man that we see with a finger on the road. I think the story is trying to mislead us into thinking that the villagers are the villains, when in reality there's just a big bad lurking in the background. After the hunt, Yuki picks up Daigo with Mashiro, who hasn't spoken since the incident. Daigo blames himself, but Yuki comforts and reassures him. As they drive, they pass a mysterious woman on the road. The next day, Daigo investigates the fate of the last officer, Osamu Kano, starting with his daughter, Sumire Kano. Kisuke invites Daigo to a funeral ceremony for the victim, while Mashiro enters elementary school. During the ritual, villagers must cover their faces, but they realize an extra person is present. The mysterious woman from the road reveals herself as Sumire Kano, who claims that her father was murdered. Confronting her, Kisuke dismisses her accusations, but she kicks over the coffin, revealing it to be empty. Sumire says, "There's nobody to bury because they've already eaten her." A mob starts to form, but Kisuke distracts the angry crowd, giving Daigo a chance to take Sumire away. Before they can escape though, a smelly man with his face covered attacks the crowd, causing chaos. Sumire explains to Daigo that the villagers eat the dead to pay respects, inheriting their souls as part of a mourning process, a practice repeated for decades worldwide. She adds that the last time she saw her father, he was fighting with the Goto family, suggesting that they are somehow involved in the recent events. Determined to investigate, Daigo heads to the Goto family property. A tree falls in his path, but a man related to Kisuke chops it up, allowing Daigo to proceed. But before letting him go, the man shows Daigo a recording of Kano's last known sighting. The footage depicts Kano, angry and distressed, accusing the Goto family of cannibalism. Despite the man's obvious instability, Daigo decides to use it as evidence and continues his investigation for Sumire's sake. Meanwhile, the man discusses with another, hinting that he, the old man from the first chapter, will deal with Daigo. Back at home, a neighbor warns Yuki about the barbaric nature of the Goto family. Meanwhile, the Goto family discusses Daigo's investigation, and one member decides to hunt him down. As Daigo investigates the property, he senses someone stalking him and recording him in the same spot as the footage. Suddenly, a man points a rifle at Daigo's head, demanding that he leaves. Daigo remains calm, refusing to go. When the man pulls the trigger, Daigo swiftly disarms him, taking the rifle away. Though very calm, Daigo is unnerved by the man's intent to kill. Returning home, Yuki finds Kisuke, Yusuke, and another man inside her house. She demands to know their purpose as more Goto family members enter. They aren't looking for Daigo, they're after her. We cut back to Daigo as he takes down the three men, arresting them. One of the men warns Daigo that it's too late and that he won't let you go. As Daigo prepares to take them away, the elderly members of the Goto family plead with him to let him handle the matter. Daigo asks who he is, only to find out when the old man swings a scythe towards his head. The final scene is Nakamura trying to call Daigo, but it leads to voicemail. He has found the identity of the finger that he sent him. It's none other than the last officer, Osamu Kano. As many of you know, I love a good mystery series, and this story is filled with them. We learned that I was right about the villagers participating in cannibalism for mourning and respect. However, it's not all of the villagers, but a specific family called the Gotos. Another big mystery is the last officer, Osamu Kano. He decided to go after the Goto family for cannibalism, which is not legal in Japan, but I feel like it's an overreaction going to their property waving a gun around. Unless, like I said in the last part, the old man is committing multiple murders that end in cannibalism. But other than that, one of my favorite mysteries of this series revolves around Daigo and his family. Why did Daigo get transferred from a city to a middle of nowhere village? What was the incident that caused Mashiro to be mute? And how is Daigo responsible for it? These are the biggest questions I had reading, and it made me engaged in the overall story going forward. The only real problem I have is some of the side characters aren't really that interesting, and it's pretty difficult to keep up with like the whole Goto family, but I'm not really interested in Yusuke or this guy or even the 3 dudes that tried to kill Daigo anyway. Sumire was a great twist character, but I honestly don't think we need her in the story moving forward. I mean, she's not a detective or a cop, so I think just having a kid's sidekick would just be very unnecessary for the plot. I think this is one of the best ways to end a volume, and it keeps me coming back for more. Daigo is found unconscious, floating in a river by the police. He wakes up in the hospital, his family by his side, and the Goto family standing in front of him. Though he's obviously angry, Kisuke and the others apologize for their violent family members, explaining that they were trying to protect Yuki and Mashiro. One family member apologizes for his brother cutting Daigo's forehead, but Daigo corrects him that it wasn't his brother, but an old man. Kisuke mentions that 2 of the attackers have turned themselves in, but 1 remains at large. Daigo starts to recall the incident and realizes that the old man was the same one from the funeral, recognized by his foul odor. Kisuke mocks Daigo, who responds by kicking them out. Later, Matsuo Goto finds Daigo's phone, listens to the voicemail, and texts Nakamura to arrange a meeting. Daigo tries to leave the hospital to arrest Matsuo, leaving the police escorts to protect his family. Outside his house, Sumire tells Daigo that she's leaving the village, but gives him another clue: the last phone number her father called. Before she leaves, she tells Daigo that Kisuke is different from the other family members. Yuki expresses her desire to leave the village, fearing for their safety after the last officer's death and Daigo's near fatal encounter. Daigo agrees she should leave, but she insists that she won't go without him. Daigo tries to call Nakamura, unaware that Matsuo is planning an ambush. Daigo heads to the hospital with another cop. There, he meets with the police chief and discusses his attack at the Goto residence. The chief and 2 other professionals are shocked by Daigo's account and agrees to reopen the case, but decide to keep Daigo out of it because of his connection. He accepts, leaving the case for the sake of being with his family. As Daigo leaves to meet Nakamura, a truck nearly crashes into his car. Matsuo was the one driving, and he turns himself in. He confesses to killing Kano, and as proof, leads them to his corpse. But Daigo remains skeptical. The chief questions Daigo's testimony about his attacker, but Daigo stands by his story despite the elders' conflicting testimonies. The chief warns Daigo again to stay away from the Goto family. Kisuke and other Goto members visit the corpse to pay their respects, urging Daigo to get along with them. Though Daigo wants to continue investigating, he knows he can't afford to end up like Kano for his family's sake. Daigo notices a bite mark on his shoulder, realizing that the Goto family wants to keep him from uncovering the truth about the old man. 2 weeks later, life seems to return to normal. Daigo resumes his police duties while Yuki and Mashiro live peacefully among the villagers. Daigo notices that the villagers also avoided mentioning Kainos' name, not just the Goto family. One day, a villager invites Daigo to a drinking party, and Yuki asks to join. The party goes well until Daigo brings up the Goto family. A villager admits that they avoid discussing the Kano incident due to its connection to the Goto family, blaming themselves for not intervening. After the party, Daigo asks Yuki if she still wants to leave the village, but she decides to stay, feeling accepted by the villagers despite the incident. He has no right to blame the villagers for what happened to Kano. After all, he did kill someone in front of Mashiro. Now this story takes a pretty interesting turn from here. We get answers to questions that basically solve this whole mystery, but it just turns out that there's way more to the story than we thought. Not only do we know what happened to Mashiro, but now we also know what happened to Kano. Why are the Gotos avoiding Daigo? What's the deal with the old man, and why are the villagers, including the chief of police, afraid of the Goto family? This does kind of prove my theory that it's just the old man who's the big bad, but he hasn't really killed anyone that we know of, and that also doesn't explain why the old man saved Daigo. But even if the mystery isn't solved, I like the fact that Daigo basically moved on for the sake of his family. It shows a lot of character to Daigo, and it gives us more wholesome scenes of the family. We finally know the incident that made Mashiro mute, and we won't get the full details until the next chapter, but already we could paint a picture of what happened. I didn't think much about the daughter being mute. I didn't think it was really important to the story until they really revealed it to be trauma-based. Mashiro being mute also plays a really big part in the horror as well. Ninomiya states that, "When I thought of the last scene for the first chapter, if it was a normal child, they would have been able to tell their parents about the situation, and I think the sense of urgency would have been different." Even though Gannibal wasn't meant to be a horror series, the situation of a mute child encountering all kinds of horror and not being able to tell anyone of power, in a way enhances the horror element. Trauma affects everybody differently, but it's way more horrific to see and feel the trauma itself, which perfectly leads us to "5 months earlier, Daigo responds to a backup call from 2 detectives chasing down a suspect. Meanwhile, at a school event, Mashiro describes her father as a policeman who catches bad guys. But while everyone calls her dad great, she doesn't think so, because he's a violent policeman. We see Daigo brutally interrogating a suspect, seeking the names of his accomplices. After extracting the information, Daigo is confronted by a superior, warning him about his actions. Daigo is soon to be assigned to a sexual assault investigation involving children, which he's very eager to catch the perpetrator. At a park, Yuki and Mashiro are approached by Daigo, who wants to play. But Mashiro is very upset with Daigo for beating up a neighborhood boy who did things with kids, though she doesn't know the whole story. As they leave, a hooded figure, Tsubasa, the neighborhood boy, appears. Daigo warns Tsubasa to stay away from Mashiro, or else he'll kill him. However, it's very difficult for him since he's in love with her. The next day, Daigo investigates a suspect who was involved with 3 young children. Mashiro sneaks out to visit Tsubasa, thanking him for his kindness but saying that they can't play anymore. Daigo receives a call that Tsubasa let a child into his house and rushes over. Police knock at his door and Mashiro begins to call out to her dad. Daigo, panicking, breaks in and assaults Tsubasa. Mashiro tries to intervene but is pushed aside. Daigo's partner tackles him and Mashiro cries, questioning why he would act this way. As a cop escorts Mashiro out, Tsubasa slashes the cop's ankle and holds Mashiro at knife point, demanding Daigo shoot him. Daigo, forced to act, shoots Tsubasa. After the incident, Mashiro becomes mute and emotionless, prompting the family to move to Kuge village. In the present, the family and villagers celebrate New Year's. Back at home, Daigo thanks Yuki for supporting him through everything. As they start to get intimate, Daigo notices someone watching through the window. Outside, he finds "Murderer" painted on their house. One of the Goto members from Kisuke's group was responsible for the graffiti. The villagers quickly clean it up, but soon after, Daigo receives a call about another incident. He meets up with Kisuke, who has turned in the suspect. He had been bragging about peeping on Daigo and Yuki, but denied being the one who vandalized their house. Daigo, suspicious, believes it could only have been another Goto. Kisuke, offended by this accusation, questions if Daigo is trying to provoke a fight. Tensions rise as Kisuke points out that Daigo is placing too much trust in the villagers, who were the ones that ostracized the Kanos in the first place. Daigo is reluctant to believe this, but while Kisuke insists that Mutsuo was the one who killed Kano, the villagers were the ones that pushed them to that brink. Not only did Sumiri's father lose his sanity, but so did her mother. We see Sumire visiting her mother in the hospital, who doesn't recognize her and mistakes her for a villager. In her confused state, she talks about her missing husband and her wanting to escape, repeating the words "run" over and over. As this unsettling scene unfolds, one of the villagers casts a suspicious look towards Yuki and Mashiro. Now there's a lot to unpack here, but it's pretty hard to think of Daigo as a hostile person. We did get a little glimpse at that in the first volume, but never to this extent. It makes sense now why he was a well-known detective who had to leave the town for not only his, but his family's mental health. It's great to see more family time, but the switch from a happy, wholesome relationship to a realistic, grungy one is very jarring. Daigo isn't a bad guy, he's just a very angry person, especially towards criminals. He might have a backstory with a certain criminal, or maybe it was just the hatred of Tsubasa that made him this way, but it was really hard to read the last part of the flashback, and it was still pretty difficult to read the scene of Mashiro talking about her dad. Like I said throughout this whole video, this situation is very realistic. It's very normal for a child to speak without a filter. I'm happy to see that Daigo and his family are living happily, but this series wouldn't be going if there weren't some setbacks. The Goto family are making some moves, but it's revealed that it wasn't them that graffitied the house, but it must have been someone that knows about Daigo's past. I was wrong in saying that the villagers aren't bad people, that it's just the Goto family, but it's definitely implied that something shady is going around. Or it could just be another misdirection like what happened at the end of volume 1. But we'll most likely not know that until next time. When first making this video, I really thought that I would cover 3 or 4 volumes just to get it out of the way, but I grew to be glued by this series, so much to the point where I had so much to say, I had to split the volumes into literally 2 parts. Gannibal, for a series that wasn't meant to be horror, masterfully intertwined elements of horror, mystery, and psychological drama to create such a realistic and immersive narrative. From the unsettling depiction of cannibalistic rituals to the intricate relationships between the villagers and the protagonist's family, Gannibal keeps us at the edge of our seats. The realistic portrayal of trauma and the moral complexities faced by Daigo and his family just add layers of depth to make this story both compelling and thought-provoking. But I absolutely love this series, and it's clear that Gannibal isn't about the cannibalism, but it's about uncovering the dark truths in Kuge Village. Daigo is in the shower, mulling over Gotos' disturbing claim that the villagers caused the Kanos' insanity. Although skeptical, he decides to investigate. Meanwhile, 2 hooded figures give an old man a ribcage and ominously predict that Daigo and his family will face a similar fate to the Kanos. Daigo calls Sumire to ask about the villagers. She denies them being involved in her father's death, but mentions her mother has felt like someone was watching her. Daigo is setting up a fence around his house when Sabu-san shows up, criticizing the fence for giving off a bad impression in their trust-based community. Daigo mutters his annoyance, prompting Yuki to say that they'll take it down. Yuki also comments how Sabu always seems to be around during trouble, suggesting that he might be watching them. The villagers start acting strangely towards Daigo, amplifying tensions. They insist he must respect their elders and avoid trouble, especially given his outsider status and his obvious past. Daigo tries to visit Sabu but ends up apologizing after a heated argument with Yuki. Sabu accepts the apology and things seem to settle down until Daigo receives a call from the last number Kano dialed before he died. The caller, who claims to be the owner of Kano's satellite phone, says they need to meet in person. Daigo notices a neighbor watching and moves to a private spot for the call. The man reveals that Kano was searching for evidence of cannibalism, but won't explain more until they meet. He directs Daigo to a location deep in the woods by a river. The man, who is across the river for safety, reveals that Kano was eaten by villagers and that they are indeed cannibals. And the proof is his face. He recounts witnessing a festival where he was tied up and eaten by a hooded figure as a kid. After waking up in his mother's arms, he learned he had no family register and went into hiding. When he was 18, he met Kano to seek answers about what happened to him. With another festival approaching, Daigo needs to find an excuse to investigate further and save the next victim. The man hints at multiple collaborators, suggesting that finding Kano's phone might help identify them. At the village's festival preparations, Sabu questions Daigo's whereabouts, and when he arrives late, they ask who he was talking to on the phone. The tension is diffused by Munechika, the future chief priest, who introduces himself and suggests that he and Daigo talk later. Outside, he suggests that Daigo and his family should leave the village. Munechika explains the festival's grim purpose, offering children to reduce the number of mouths to feed. He warns Daigo to be careful or risk ending up like Kano, and offers his phone number. Daigo then notices that he has a satellite phone and wonders if he might be a collaborator. Before Daigo can mention anything, Sabu interrupts. Daigo then receives a call about an accident, but when he arrives, it's a ruse. The caller, Utada, identifies himself as a collaborator with Kano and runs a site called Chronicle. Utada wants to talk in private, so they meet up at a love hotel. Utada provides details about the unknown man's article about the village's cannibalism practices, and suggests tracing Kano's phone might reveal the whereabouts of the missing children, asking him why there's always one stillborn a year. At the festival prep, Sabu's daughter, Kanako, gets a little too close to Mashiro, with Yuki going to confront her. Sabu reveals Kanako had a stillborn baby, but Kanako insists that her baby is alive. As Kanako makes a scene, Yuki notices bruises on her back, possible abuse from Sabu. This revelation cuts to a child locked in a cage next to the old man. As Daigo returns to the prep party, Yuki tells him about the altercation with Sabu and his daughter. Daigo visits Sabu the next morning, trying to talk to his daughter. Sabu says, why throw away all the trust that they built up on some nonsense? But Daigo claps back, saying it doesn't matter what he says, it's a formal investigation against him. Kanako comes home, and Daigo tries to learn about her bruises, but Kanako asks Daigo to find her child, who was taken by the head of the Goto family, Jin Goto, aka the grandma that died in the first chapter. Sabu tries to dismiss Kanako, but Daigo insists on investigating. Daigo meets up with Munechika and informs Daigo that the Gotos control all of the village land, and the fear of the Goto family is passed down through generations. Multiple women have reported Jin Goto taking their children at birth. Later that night, Kanako meets with Daigo and discusses her baby's birth. Jin Goto, the village midwife, had said her baby wasn't breathing, and when she took the baby outside, Kanako saw the baby's hand move, but was ignored by her father. Yuki calls Daigo to tell him that Sabu is at their house searching for Kanako. They rush home, where villagers confront Daigo. He was just trying to get the rest of the story from Kanako, but the villagers want to know where he's been sneaking off to. Daigo says that he was researching the Goto family and then takes down one of the villagers. Despite Daigo's protest, the villagers report his actions to the Gotos. The next day, Daigo's wife reminds him of a special day, but he doesn't really remember. Kisuke then invites Daigo for a hunt, where they discuss Daigo's research on the Goto family. Kisuke expresses respect for Daigo's dedication to his family and implies that he would do the same for his own. They end the day with a successful hunt and Kisuke dropping Daigo off at home. The volume then closes with Mashiro in a field and Yuki searching for her on her birthday. When Daigo arrives, he immediately notices that Yuki and Mashiro's shoes are missing. As he steps into the kitchen, he sees a birthday cake prepared for Mashiro and quickly calls Yuki to apologize. But before he can say anything, Yuki tells him that Mashiro has gone missing. Daigo quickly realizes that the hunting trip was just a distraction, a setup for someone to kidnap Mashiro. We then cut to the Goto family casually discussing Kisuke's hunt. It's revealed that Kisuke, who will soon be the head of the Goto family, is responsible for handling all of the dirty work. Yuki returns home in tears, with villagers rallying to search for Mashiro. When Daigo confronts them, asking if they knew anything, Sabu defensively blames Daigo for Mashiro's disappearance, accusing him of negligence for going on the hunting trip. Daigo immediately grows suspicious. How did they know he was hunting? The villagers claim that they saw him, but Daigo knows that it's impossible to tell. Furious, Daigo warns them that if he finds out that they're involved in Mashiro's disappearance, he won't hesitate to kill them. As the tensions escalate, Yuki receives a call. They found Mashiro. The villagers, unnerved by Daigo's behavior, comment on how he's starting to resemble Mr. Kano. On the way home, Yuki and Daigo argue about his erratic behavior. She worries that his obsession with investigating the Gotos is tearing their family apart. Meanwhile, the Goto family holds a meeting with one of the villagers. They note how quiet things have been lately and expresses excitement for the upcoming festival, now just 3 days away. Daigo tries to act like everything is normal for his family, but the weight of his investigation looms large. He wonders if any Goto family members have doubts about the festival and its dark traditions. We then cut to Yusuke and Iwayo, hooded up and feeding children locked in cells. Iwayo explains that the old man plans to eat one of the children and that it's now Yusuke's responsibility to uphold the tradition. As Yusuke washes the child who's to be sacrificed, he breaks down in tears, struggling with the reality that this is a human being. Despite having grown up in the Goto tradition, Yusuke finds himself questioning what he's been taught. As festival preparations conclude, Munechika approaches Daigo, mentioning that he knows about the hunting trip with Kisuke. He then reveals that he's known Kisuke since elementary school, and that Kisuke's younger brother Yusuke is known to be very honest and kind. The festival practice begins, with villagers burning a human-sized wooden mannequin covered in flowers, dancing and drumming around it. Munechika reminds Daigo that the festival originally involved human sacrifices to the gods, a curse passed down through generations. He then asks Daigo how this all appears from an outsider's perspective. The next day, Kisuke is officially appointed head of the Goto family, vowing to run the festival as smoothly as his grandmother once did. Daigo has the day off, so the family decides to celebrate Mashiro's birthday. After dinner, Yuki is happier than she's been in a long time, but Daigo secretly plans for them to leave the village. Sensing danger, Iwayo orders men to keep an eye on Daigo and Yusuke, worried that they might try to betray the family, like Yusuke's mother did. Daigo discovers a tracking device on his car planted by the villagers. He decides to take his family for a drive, with a Goto family member watching from a distance. As they drive, Daigo grows suspicious that they're being followed. He tries to lose their tail, eventually swerving wildly until their pursuer crashes into a railing. The Goto member calls Iwayo, reporting that he's lost them. Daigo then meets up with his old partner, Yamabushi. Yuki begs Daigo to stay with them, but Daigo insists that he must return to the village to save the child in danger. He promises Yuki that he'll come back to them, and then heads back to the village. We flash forward to the future, where Daigo is lying on the ground and Kisuke offers him a piece of meat as the old man devours a human. 40 hours earlier, Kisuke is holding a meeting about Daigo's disappearance, certain that Daigo will return, but unconcerned since the festival will continue as planned. Kisuke recalls how the old man once cut his forehead, mirroring Daigo's injury, and wonders where Daigo is now. Daigo is in the woods, staring down the Goto family home when Iwayo appears behind them. They engage in a struggle, but Iwayo is too strong. Daigo demands to know about the children for the festival, but he asks how he knows about that, confirming his suspicion that there's a traitor within the Goto family. Iwayo acknowledges that Daigo has the day off and suggests he takes his time before the festival at the Goto home. Daigo is then guided to the Goto family home, where Kisuke is waiting. They share a drink, just as they did when they first met. Meanwhile, Iwayo searches a tunnel, suspecting that Yusuke may have betrayed the family. Kisuke suggests that they drink until the festival begins, but Daigo insists that the children be released first. He proposes blaming everything on Jin Goto, which will result in light sentences for the others that were involved, to make it look fair. One of the Goto members, angered by this, pulls a gun out on Daigo, but Daigo quickly disarms him and holds him hostage. Daigo warns that if he dies, a real investigation will begin. Another Goto member yells at Daigo, but Kisuke silences him by smashing a bottle over his head, ordering everyone to put their guns down. Kisuke believes that Daigo is losing his mind, just like Mr. Kano did. Even the village chief agrees, urging Daigo to stand down and abandon the investigation. The volume ends with Yusuke and the child getting ready to leave for the festival. We flash back to a young Kisuke and Yosuke sitting with Jin Goto as she reveals a painful truth. Their mother was a traitor. Jin sternly tells them to forget about her entirely. She singles out Yusuke though, saying that out of all of the family members, she cares for him the most. Jin urges Yusuke to move on from his mother and focus on loving her instead, so he can become a proud member of the Goto family. Back in the present, Daigo is in a car with the chief heading to headquarters. Daigo had insisted on this private conversation, sensing that the chief had something important to share. Upon arrival, they meet with 5 other detectives, all focused on investigating the Goto family. The chief, burdened with guilt over Kano's death, is determined to make things right. The detectives discuss how Kano was eaten and how a Goto family member took the blame for it. Daigo then chimes in, mentioning an old man within the Goto family who might hold the key to their secrets. One detective presents a Goto family tree, noting that Jin Goto was always obsessed with bloodlines. The elder male figure, Kisuke's father, wasn't related to them by blood, so the mantle of head of the family passed down to Kisuke, the eldest son. As for Jin's daughter, Ai Goto, she mysteriously disappeared 18 years ago. Daigo speculates that the person that saved the mysterious man might be Ai. Meanwhile, Yusuke thinks about escaping the prison with the child, but Iwayo suddenly appears, suspicious that Yusuke might be the traitor. Iwayo strikes him down and orders 2 guards to watch over him and the child. As he leaves the cave, it is revealed that Yutada was sent to keep an eye on him, suspecting he might know something about where the children are hidden. Daigo's gamble paid off, and now they know the exact location of the kids. However, they still need solid evidence to justify sending in an armed special force, so they decide to split into 3 units. One to continue investigating the Goto family, another to search for Ai Goto, and the last to gather more information about the children. Before heading out, the chief visits his grandfather, while Daigo meets up with Dr. Nakamura. Daigo apologizes to Nakamura for dragging him into this, but Nakamura only asks who he can trust in the investigation. He also reveals a past connection with Kano. The chief questions his grandfather about the Goto family, who advises him to stay away from them. He shares a rumor about a powerful landowner with an illness who is known to smile constantly, an illness that is gained by eating other humans. When Daigo asks Nakamura if he's a collaborator for Kano, he denies it, saying he was just monitoring the disease. 6 months ago, Nakamura was checking on both Kano and Jin Goto. Jin's condition wasn't severe, but her mobility was impaired, and she would often smile eerily. Eventually, she would become wild and start attacking people. Nakamura suggested that Jin's condition resembles Kuru disease, a rare disease caused by cannibalism. Kano initially had a good relationship with both the villagers and the Gotos, but everything changed when he met Jin Goto. Kano brought Jin back to her family, advising them to take her to the hospital as it seems that she'd be suffering from a new illness, despite the Gotos insisting that she had dementia. The Gotos' defensive reaction sparked Kano to investigate deeper. Daigo begins to question everything, including whether Jin was really killed by a bear or if she was really eaten. The chief's conversation with his grandfather ends with the cryptic remark that that person is currently at the Goto home and that during the war, this person went straight into hiding. Nakamura warns Daigo that Kuru disease is fatal and incurable, often referred to as the madness disease. Daigo then receives a call from the mysterious man, who asks if he's alright. Daigo encourages him to come out of hiding and help with the investigation, ensuring him that he will be safe and that he's working with the police. Daigo then asks if his mother has said anything before she died. The truth is that she didn't, because she's still alive, and her real name is Ai Goto. The man promises to bring her to Daigo if he can guarantee her safety. After the call ends, the man confronts Ai, who refuses to discuss the past and hides the truth from him, only trying to protect him. Daigo informs the chief that the man will bring in Ai, but acknowledges it's still not enough evidence to deploy the special forces. They consider canceling the operation, but Daigo is reluctant. He's going to save the kids, even if he has to do it alone. As the villagers prepare for a feast, Muneshika meets with Kisuke, urging him to cancel the festival. He insists that they now have the power to stop it and free the children. Kisuke, however, pretends like he doesn't know anything and dismisses his concerns. When Muneshika pulls out a shotgun to force the issue, Kisuke quickly knocks him down. Daigo, determined, heads back to the village alone. Meanwhile, Kisuke and the rest of the Goto family gather up with Yusuke and the child. The volume ends with Daigo making his way to the prison and a final scene of Sumire clutching her stomach, calling out for Kisuke. Gannibal has always managed to keep me at the edge of my seat, but in hindsight these 3 volumes were nothing more than exposition. Now that doesn't mean the story was boring, that's not the case at all. The whole point of these 3 volumes is to build up to the festival, and it does an amazing job at making me excited for what seems like a endgame level event. There are twists and turns all over the series, and it just keeps on getting crazier and crazier with every volume. We get cameos from old characters, new interesting characters, and now an all-out war with the villagers and the Gotos versus Daigo. Literally a one versus the world scenario. My favorite part about these volumes is that we're seeing a mental war going on between the 3. The villagers and the Gotos are trying to convince Daigo that he's insane, trying to push him to the breaking point like how they did with Kano. Little things like kidnapping Mashiro and making it seem like an accident, or spreading rumors of them throughout the village. Things like that just to mess with his psyche are just so interesting, and it even begins to affect his family life. Torn between whether he should keep going with the investigation or just quit and live happily with his family. The characters are always improving, even random cameo appearances play huge roles when covering the entire story. The Goto family are also dealing with some serious issues. Kisuke and Yusuke are kind of torn between the traditions, but Kisuke being the older one and the new head of the table, he has a duty to complete these tasks. Plus, to him the village would never change because the villagers are all just freaking psychos. Then you have Yusuke, who's torn with the traditions but is very much against it. And now he's seen as a traitor even though he hasn't really done anything yet. But like I said, these volumes are meant to hype up the festival event. I can understand 1 or 2 volumes doing this, but for 3 volumes of just lore dumping and repeated information that we already knew is kinda insane. And a little nitpick for volume 3 and 4, they really don't know how to end these volumes. They're pretty lackluster in my opinion, and the only good cliffhanger is from the 5th volume, where it's revealed that Kisuke may have impregnated Sumire, which would add more family tension to the Goto family feud. But overall, I really did enjoy these last couple of volumes. They build tension, they add on to the mystery and the world building, the characters are all still really interesting to watch, and now with the festival coming up, I'm expecting an all-out war. The best way to really describe this is that these 3 volumes are literally the first Dune movie, where we get all of the information dumped out of the way for Dune 2 to give us all of the fan service drama and action later on. It's clear that the real horror is just beginning, and I can't wait to see how twisted this tale unfolds. Volume 6 kicks off with a flashback of Yuki giving birth to Mashiro, cutting sharply to Daigo in the present, preparing to storm the cave. He breaks in, alerting Kisuke and 2 other Goto members. Inside, Daigo finds a prison scratched up but with no signs of the kids. Kisuke confronts him, but Daigo levels a gun to his head, demanding to know where the child is. Kisuke plays dumb, saying he doesn't know where the children are, but Daigo catches his slip. He never mentioned multiple children. As the other Goto members notice the broken lock, Kisuke urges Daigo to run. Reluctantly, Daigo flees with a lock of hair as evidence. Kisuke covers for him when the others ask questions, but for Daigo, it's already too late. The kids are gone. The Gotos argue about whether to go after Daigo, but there's no point. The decision has already been made, as we see the old man roaming the forest backed up by an army of armed Goto members. Daigo, ready to leave the village, hears a branch snap, and there's the old man, looming over him. The elder lunges with a scythe, but Daigo points his gun at his head. He demands to know why the old man saved him during the funeral, only to try and kill him now. We get a brief, haunting glimpse of Sumire as the old man mutters something, then tries to bite Daigo's neck. Instead though, he bites Daigo's arm, and Daigo headbutts him off. In that moment, he he realizes that the old man is the one that devoured Kano and Jin. The elder then charges and Daigo shoots. Elsewhere in the forest, the chief of police leads a team searching for Daigo, but they run into Iwao and a couple of other Goto members. The police, just looking for Daigo, are brushed off by the Gotos, who pretend to not know anything. But one officer notices something suspicious, a police-only backpack on one of the Goto members. Meanwhile, we see one of the police captains meeting up with a mysterious figure, Kisuke's father, the village chief. He's secretly been helping the investigation against the Gotos and was the last person Kano was in contact with before he was murdered. The chief reveals he received a satellite phone from an unknown source, but hasn't been in the loop of where the children were taken, just as Jin had planned. As the police and the Gotos part ways, each wonder if Daigo survived. The scene shifts to Yusuke, sitting at home, when his brother Kisuke enters, just wanting to talk. Yusuke reveals that his mother was right. Everything that they were taught is a lie. Kisuke tries to calm him down, saying that the kids are safe, but Yusuke pleads with him to end the festival and to rescue the kids. In the middle of this, Kisuke gets a call from Sumire. She's pregnant, and it's his. Distraught, Kisuke leaves, now questioning everything, including the festival and their mother's teachings. We then cut to Ai being confronted by the mysterious man. He tells her that she doesn't have to think about the past anymore, but she's still haunted by it. She knows that there are still children in the village waiting to be eaten. In a flashback, we learn Ai gave birth to Kisuke, but it is hinted that his father isn't the village chief, but that it might just be the old man. When Kisuke and Yusuke grew up, Kisuke grew to hate their mother, while Yusuke loved her. Jin decided to raise them as her own, giving Ai her final duty during the festival. On the night of the festival, Ai had a brief conversation with Kisuke, but he turns her down and leaves. During the ritual, Ai is forced to deliver a child to the old man. As he begins to eat the child's face, Ai burns the back of his head and attempts to save the child. Jin orders her to stop, but Kisuke steps in with a shotgun, standing in between them. Surrounded, Kisuke threatens to shoot himself instead if they don't let Ai go. Jin agrees but warns him that if he defies her again, she'll kill him herself. Ai is forced to raise the child, but Jin demands that she loves him this time. Later, Jin reflects with her husband, wondering if they were right to let Ai go. Everything is going according to her plan, except for Kisuke interfering, which she didn't expect. She's keeping a close watch on him now though. The volume ends with Kisuke in the prison caring for another child when he bashes his head against the cell, causing the scar that we see today. We then cut to Daigo waking up with Munechika sitting next to him. Daigo wakes up to find Munechika welcoming him, assuring him that he's not an enemy and explaining that Kisuke has requested his help to escape the village. They're in the same place where children were once sacrificed to the gods. The villagers believed the ritual worked when the bodies disappeared, but in reality, someone was eating them. Around that time, the Goto family moved in. We then flash back to Daigo's brutal fight with the old man, showing how he barely escaped with a bite mark on his arm, showing proof of the villagers' cannibalism. Munechika suggests that Daigo wait until the festival starts, using the distraction to escape, but Daigo refuses to run, determined to end the festival himself. Munechika agrees and wants to introduce Daigo to someone crucial, his father, the current village chief priest and former head of the Goto family. At the festival, the priest announces his upcoming death, appointing Munechika as the new chief priest to carry on their grim tradition. After meeting the priest, Daigo also plans to meet with Kisuke, knowing that he'll be a key factor in their fight. Meanwhile, Kisuke meets up with Sumire. She embraces him, bringing up memories of how they first met. She was the subject of a cruel rumor in the village, but Kisuke showed her kindness, which quickly led to their deeper relationship. Back in the present, Sumire asks to hear Kisuke's true feelings, but he responds by pointing a shotgun at her stomach. She begs him to run away with her, but Kisuke is torn, so he drops the shotgun and hugs her. But he can't just abandon the village. He tells her to live her life without him. Their moment is interrupted by Oronya, a Goto member, who reminds them that Kisuke's unborn son is the future head of the family. Kisuke points the shotgun at him, but he is outnumbered. Oronya orders them to come with him. While walking in the woods, Daigo receives a call from Kisuke, who promises to help stop the festival and reveals the location of the missing children. Kisuke has a plan though, and tells Orunya to gather the family. At the Goto home with all of the members gathered, the Special Defense Force approaches, and a Goto member warns the others of the incoming fight. The police demand that they turn in their weapons, claiming that they only want to search the area. The Goto family reluctantly hands over their guns as the police search their homes. Iwayo grows suspicious though, believing the police are just stalling. But for what? Meanwhile, Daigo heads to Sabo-san's house, where all of the children are actually locked up, and where the police chief and 2 other officers join him in preparing for a raid. Tensions start rising as Iwayo confronts the police, who insult the Goto family, calling them abnormal. The captain accuses Jin Goto of killing her own brother to take control of the family. Before he can continue, Orunya pulls out a hidden gun, but Kisuke quickly disarms him to de-escalate the situation. Suddenly, the old man stabs an officer in the eye with his scythe, sparking chaos. As the Gotos and the police clash violently, Kisuke watches in horror. He retreats to protect Sumire, but the village chief appears, holding them at gunpoint. The chief reveals his dark past, handpicked by Jin herself to lead the village, despite having an illness that required surgery. However, the surgery Jin arranged was a vasectomy, meaning that the chief isn't Kisuke's father. In a final confrontation, Kisuke overpowers him, but stops short of killing him when Sumire intervenes. As the village descends into violence, the police captain confesses to Iwayo that it's too late. Daigo has already saved the children. The raid is a success, and Sabo-san and his men are arrested. After the raid, Kanako reunites with her son, but the victory is short-lived. Sabo-san hints at exposing more secrets but is shot dead before he can even talk. In a sudden twist, a truck full of Goto members arrive, spraying bullets at the officers. As the dust settles, the festival has officially begun, and now they just need a sacrifice. But Daigo's daughter seems to be like the perfect candidate. The battle rages on as the Goto family desperately searches for the kids. One of the Goto members finds them, but Daigo stands in their defense, taking down most of the shooters. Orunya orders for Daigo to be captured alive, and in a twisted move, a Goto member holds Kanako and her son hostage. All Daigo has to do is surrender, and they'll be spared. Daigo keeps on fighting though, however, formulating a plan to save the family. Just as the Goto members prepare to call in backup, Yusuke turns on the Gotos, shooting the other family members and helping the police arrest them. Daigo, very grateful, refuses to handcuff Yusuke, acknowledging that he saved him. Oronya calls, unaware of the betrayal. Daigo picks up and calmly tells him to surrender, but Oronya responds by claiming that he has Daigo's wife and daughter already in his grasp. At the hideout, a female officer and her partner arrive to pick up Yuki and Mashiro. As they head to the parking garage, 2 supposed officers claim that the police chief sent them to retrieve Daigo's family. Suspicious, the female cop and Mashiro both hesitate. Suddenly, the fake cop grabs Mashiro, triggering a fight. They manage to subdue the imposters and steal their car. After interrogating the fake cop, they realize they should have been watching for a tail. Just then, a truck crashes straight into them. Back at the Goto house, the family is burying their dead, while Iwayo interrogates the police captain. Kisuke is also at the house, but Sumire escapes to protect the future head of the Goto family. The captain reveals that there was a war between the Gotos and the villagers 70 years ago, stunning Iwayo. The captain then drops a bombshell that he is also a part of the Goto family himself. He's the grandson of Jin Gotos' elder brother, who was meant to be the head of the family. Before the captain can say any more, Iwayo silences him by driving a nail into his ear. Meanwhile, the chief priest is dying, haunted by visions of a younger Jin Goto in the ritual room. Daigo, determined to end things, gears up to head back to the village alone, despite a police captain's warnings. However, to him, this fight is personal, between him and the Goto family, and he vows to kill them all. Yuki and Mashiro are captured and brought back to the village, where Orina grows suspicious of Kisuke's silence, questioning if he's betrayed the family. The captain tells Iwayo the entire story of the war 70 years ago, and to tell the Gotos the story so they can stop fighting. But Iwayo has other plans, snapping the captain's neck. Orina, still doubting Kisuke's loyalty, orders him to kill Yuki as a test, but Kisuke replies, asking him what he would do if he doesn't, saying that he still has some work left to finish. Iwayo enters, confirming the captain's death, but adds that it didn't lead to anything new. Just then, the village chief appears, revealing himself as the true traitor. He knew everything and had been scheming to end the festival from the start. Iwayo shifts gears, deciding the new target to be the chief. We flash back to a time where Kisuke, Yusuke, and I were happy, hiking together with the chief. The memory fades, and we cut to Kisuke plunging a knife into the chief's chest, killing him. His final words to him were, "Don't worry, Dad, I'll change everything." The Gotos whisk Daigo's family away, and Daigo calls Orunya, demanding to know if they're safe. He smugs, thinking Daigo is finally starting to understand. But just then, a gunshot rings out over the call. Daigo reveals that he has Yusuke as a hostage and will kill him if necessary. Orunya mocks him, asking if any cops are around, but Daigo isn't playing by the rules anymore. Orunya reluctantly hands the phone to Yuki, who begs Daigo for help. They agree to meet and settle things once and for all. The chief priest, now awake, listens as one of the goons recounts what happened at Sabu's house. Outside, the festival continues, more lively now that a Goto member has been killed. The priest then reflects on how he and Jin Goto started this ritual together, but now it's all falling apart, undone by one man. Daigo and Yusuke arrived at the abandoned tunnel to meet the Goto family with Yuki and Mashiro in tow. Orunya is thrilled, finally facing Daigo for the first time after waiting for this moment since Matsuo's arrest. Just as they prepare for the exchange, Iwayo halts them with a single question. How did Yusuke get captured by the police? With his skills, he could have killed them all. So who was he really pointing his gun at? Yusuke breaks down, confessing that he just didn't want anyone to die. He just wants the cycle of violence to end. His confession shocks everyone, but Orunya, strangely sympathetic, says that he understands his pain. Just then, a gunshot suddenly echoes through the tunnel. The volume ends with Mashiro whispering, "Dad, I taste blood." Now that the festival has officially begun, the slow-paced build-up of volumes 3 through 5 are gone, and now it's just straight-up action and intensity. Volume 6 still has that kind of slow burn, but Volumes 7 and 8 have all of the emotions and battles that we've just been wanting for a very, very long time. The story seems to be heading towards a great direction with many twists and turns in almost every chapter. Even though a lot of it seems out of nowhere, I'm hoping that the later volumes would give a good explanation to some of these little twists. But these 3 volumes have really done a good job to build the stakes up, and the only thing I don't really like is that the new villain is basically a Joker variant of the Gotos. I think Iwayo should have been the real bad guy, especially since they hinted at him having problems with Kisuke. It could have led to Iwayo wanting to take over as the new head of the family, and it would have been way more interesting than just a random member that we've never seen before. That being said though, Orunya is still a pretty good villain. He's an actual credible threat to Daigo, and it's shown very well, especially during the cliffhanger. Honestly, my money might just have to be on Yuki, since blood got on Mashiro's tongue, so the victim has to be close to her, so Yuki or Orunya has to be the victim, in my opinion. Dad, I can taste blood. Mashiro stares blankly, eyes wide as blood splatters around her. Orunya notices and turns, eyeing Kisuke, who's gripping the barrel of his pistol, blood streaming from a hole in his hand. Orunya recalls Grandma Jin's warning to watch Kisuke closely, though he never imagined actual betrayal. Now with a new heir in line, Orunya vows to protect them, deciding that Kisuke should just die. As he raises the pistol to shoot, Iwayo charges, slamming Orunya to the ground. Orunya fires, but Iwayo dodges and crushes his head in a brutal final blow. Iwayo is grazed by a bullet, and another Goto member falls from Daigo's shot. Kisuke shouts as Daigo reloads, preparing to fire again. Desperate, Iwayo grabs Orunya's lifeless body and hurls it at Daigo, sending him reeling. Amid the frenzy, Yuki shields Mashiro, who screams for the violence to stop. At the police station, the defense forces brief on the carnage. They question a survivor, who describes the monstrous old man and a towering figure with a hat. Meanwhile in the tunnel, Daigo fires at Iwayo, narrowly missing his head. Iwayo seizes Daigo's fingers, crushing them, but Daigo pulls the trigger, hitting Iwayo's face and eye. Iwayo slams Daigo's head to the ground, yet Daigo flips him over, bringing him down. Victorious, Daigo reaches for his gun, only to freeze as Mashiro screams at him, pleading for the violence to end. Kisuke then suddenly appears behind him and fires, taking him down. Kisuke checks on Yusuke, confirming he's okay, though Daigo and Iwayo are still barely alive, his shot having missed vital spots. Kisuke hurriedly releases Yuki and Mashiro, but footsteps echo nearby. He tells them to flee as he handles the bodies. They take off only for the old man to appear in hot pursuit. Back at the police station, Sumire is under protective custody. She agrees to cooperate but pleads for Kisuke's protection as well. The old man bears down on Yuki and Mashiro, but Kisuke intervenes, blocking his path. The old man strikes, but Mashiro steps in, pleading with him to stop. His expression changes as he lifts Mashiro, trying to escape. Yuki stands her ground, determined to protect her, grabbing a rock and smashing it across his head. He has a flashback of an older man striking a young Jin to protect a child. But as he looks back at Yuki, he murmurs, "Mother?" In another flashback, Jin and the old man as a child are trapped in a cage, with Jin vowing to create a world where he'd be worshipped. Back in the present, Kisuke raises his blade but hesitates, recalling Jin's ominous command to fear and worship the old man till his death. The old man knocks Yuki aside and bolts with Mashiro. Yuki collapses as Goto members in dark hoods arrive to retrieve Daigo's body. One kicks Yuki, but Kisuke orders them to leave her behind as she cries out for Mashiro. Elsewhere, villagers discuss the unfolding disaster, glad that Master Munechika had put an end to Jin. In a flashback, Jin flees from the villagers as they finish her off. At the Goto house, Kisuke honors Jin as the festival begins. He's informed that Iwayo survived and Daigo is in prison. Speaking with Daigo alone, Kisuke explains that his daughter was taken, but they plan to save her, with Daigo's help. Daigo struggles to understand after everything that he has done. After murdering Kisuke's family, why help him? Kisuke doesn't forgive him, but insists that his daughter deserves better. To protect his family, Kisuke must confront his own bloodline. Kisuke reveals the old man's hiding place, and together with Daigo, they take down a few guards and escape. As they move through the forest, Iwayo is seen waking up. Daigo expresses his gratitude, promising to repay Kisuke for always saving him. Kisuke replies that they can thank him after they have saved Mashiro, before the festival begins in 2 hours, with the hiding place being the cave where it all started. Meanwhile, the village chief priest awakes from a dream to find Munechika watching over him. With death approaching, the priest feels compelled to reveal the truth, the story between him, Jin-sama, and their child. The Goto clan had once avoided starvation by sacrificing children, a practice that earned them the villagers' wrath. Over time, the Gotos amassed wealth and land, yet hostility with the villagers only deepened. Sada Goto, Munechika's grandfather, once tried to mend relations, but Jin's brother, Kinji, ruined any chance of peace. In a flashback, Jin confesses to Kisuke, seeking forgiveness for her sins, claiming her child was blameless. Back in the present, Kisuke hesitates with his rifle aimed at the old man, but Daigo doesn't, pulling the trigger and ending it with a shot to the head. As he processes his actions, Daigo questions his own motives. Is he truly protecting Mashiro, or is his actions just consumed by rage? Mashiro rushes forward, shielding the old man's body, screaming at Daigo in horror. Yuki stumbles through the woods alone, found by a police officer, as now government officials have decided to take action against the Gotos. Meanwhile, Iwayo saves the guards that Daigo and Kisuke subdued. They inform him of Kisuke's betrayal, prompting Iwayo and a band of Goto members to storm the chief priestess' house, looking for Kisuke. Munechika says that Kisuke isn't there, but Iwayo doesn't believe him, knowing that he and Kisuke were the people that actually killed Jin Goto. The priest panics as a Goto member raises a gun towards Munechika. In response, the villagers rise up, determined to fight back against the Gotos. As tensions reach their peak, Munechika tells Iwayo that he knew the consequences of his actions when he killed Jin. Enraged, Iwayo grabs Munechika, snapping his neck. The chief priest laments as everything Jin had sacrificed for collapses before his eyes, all because one man moved in. What's the purpose of our life, Jin-sama? A young chief priest is staring at a younger Jin next to Kinjin Goto, Jin's brother. With a sneer, Kinjin grabs Jin by the hair, demanding who Musamune is, before dragging her back home. Masamune's father, Yoshimune, warns him against getting involved with Jin and her violent family. Kinjin has been terrorizing and robbing the villagers, and nobody dares to stand up to him. Despite the danger, Yoshimune and Masamune want to help their suffering village. Yoshimune hopes that with the head of the family, Saragoto, they might find a way to restore peace. Back at the Goto residence, Kurenai, Kenji's sister, mentions that the villagers are spreading more rumors about their family. Enraged, Kenji unleashes his rage on Jin, only to justify himself with a chilling remark. What's so wrong with eating people? Kinjin's violence worsens daily as he waits for his father, Sara, to die, freeing him to rule the village completely. Over time, the villagers beg Yoshimune to confront Kinji, so they decide to go to the Goto home. They talk about Sarada's condition as it seems that the Gotos haven't been taking good care of him. Yoshimune asks if he has a manic disease, the one rumored that most Goto members suffer through. Before he could finish though, the Gotos aim their weapons at him. Kinji warns him that if he says anything else, he'll kill him. But they can't kill him, because the villagers wouldn't be able to ignore his death. Plus, he's the only bridge between the Gotos and the villagers. Kenji needs him to gain control of Kuje village. Masamune tries to speak out against Kinji's abuse of power, but Yoshimune forces him to bow and apologize. Jin listens in, oddly amused. One evening, Masamune finds a bruised Jin hiding at the shrine. He tries to get his father, but Jin wants to talk to Masamune and leads them to a cave which will now be their secret hideout. Jin opens up, showing Masamune bite marks and sharing how both the villagers and her family treat her cruelly. She's grown attached to Masamune, her only source of kindness, and asks him to stay by her side. When Jin attempts to seduce him, Masamune gently stops her, promising that he'll support her no matter what, and wants to learn more about her troubled family. Jin says to know the family, he needs to let himself go. The following day, Yoshimune questions Masamune about his whereabouts, but Masamune deflects it, asking why Yoshimune has been getting closer to Kinji. Yoshimune responds that Masamune doesn't understand how the villagers actually live. Meanwhile, the villagers are pleased to grow crops for Kinji, who later confronts Yoshimune with a shocking accusation, asking if he has slept with Jin. When Yoshimune denies it, Kinji realizes that he's telling the truth. Although Jin was only a little girl when she arrived at the Goto house, she now uses her beauty to manipulate those around her. Kinji warns him that he better watch out or it'll consume him too. At the secret hideout, Masamune declares to Jin that he dreams of building a world where they can be together. Jin will seize control of the Goto family while Masamune influences the villagers by becoming the new chief priest. Together, they'll reshape the village for their children's future. The next night, Masamune waits for Jin at their hideout but is surprised when Yoshimune arrives instead. Meanwhile, Jin sneaks out of her house and is caught and beaten by Kinji. Yoshimune warns Masamune to stop seeing Jin, even hinting that Jin once tried to seduce him. Masamune though refuses to believe it, accusing his father of jealousy, and he storms out. Jin later escapes from Kinji feeling sick. Kurenai suspects that she's not actually sick, but that she's pregnant. This news shocks the Gotos, who bans Masamune from ever entering their home, and then villagers gossip about how someone as noble as Masamune should never mix blood with a Goto. During the village festival, Masamune sneaks away to try to find Jin. When they finally meet, she tells him that she's pregnant but doesn't know if it's his child. Masamune, convinced that it is, embraces her and reaffirms his commitment to building a new life with her. As the villagers discuss what to do with the couple, Sabu-san suggests on killing Jin. Meanwhile, Masamune and Jin overhear the festival drums and talk about its dark origins. Jin reveals that the festival isn't just about burning dolls, it involves human sacrifice. Her mother was supposed to be a sacrifice until Sadagoto saved her. Because of this, the villagers harbor resentment towards Jin and blame her for every bad harvest. Masamune reassures her, promising that they'll be happy in this new world that they're going to create. He even names their unborn child Shirogane. Suddenly, Sabu-san finds them and strikes Jin with a shovel. Masamune begs him to stop, revealing that Jin is pregnant. Unfazed, Sabu-san remarks that he would have killed her quickly if he had known. However, in a shocking twist, Jin kills Sabu-san with a rock, smashing his face in repeatedly. In a flashback, she recalls a conversation with Sadagoto, who told her that she isn't biologically related to the Gotos. Her mother was a toy for the village until Sada and Kinji rescued her when she was already pregnant with Jin. Sada insists that she isn't a cursed child but a symbol of hope. Jin, however, rejects this, vowing to devour the village that has wronged her and countless others. Back in the present, Jin tells Masamune that she wants to give birth in the village, but as she runs back, a Goto member intercepts her, striking her with a rifle. The villagers capture her, and Jin admits to killing Sabu-san. Masamune tries to take the blame, but the villagers beat her mercilessly. Yoshimune steps in, suggesting that she be sacrificed to appease the gods. Kinji, furious that the Goto members didn't bring Jin to him, reluctantly allows the villagers to handle the situation. They take Jin to a forest and tie her up to a tree and abandon her. 8 months later, 2 villagers hiking in the woods find a baby gnawing on a finger, only to be attacked by a naked, feral Jin. The village is struggling with a poor harvest, while the Gotos control most of the land. Yoshimune pleads with Kenji to help the villagers, but Kinji refuses, vowing to starve them just like they did to them before. The villagers are beginning to starve, and rumors of cannibalism spread. As one villager leaves the village, she passes by a cloaked figure who whispers, "Don't get eaten." Masamune, watching her leave, hears another villager rushing in with news that someone has been murdered, likely by Jin, who had disguised herself to evade capture. The other hiker managed to escape, but the villagers are curious as to what kept Jin fed all of this time. The final panel of the volume is the mutilated body of a villager, with Jin and her baby feasting on the remains. The rumors of Jin's survival have reached the Gotos, stirring an unsettling excitement in Kinji. As more bodies started appearing, the villagers began suspecting that Jin had help from one of the men who tied her to the tree. 2 of those men argue bitterly until Jin herself appears, swiftly dispatching them. Meanwhile, Kinji goes to visit Jin's mother's grave, only to be confronted by Yoshimune, who warns him to stop searching for her. Kinji acts ignorant, but Yoshimune can see that he's still ensnared by his obsession with Jin. Kinji lashes out, only to turn and find Jin standing right behind him. She pleads with him for protection, but Yoshimune tries to snap him out of it. Ignoring him, Kinji follows Jin. Elsewhere, Masamune and some villagers stumble across more bodies in the woods, and it's become clear that Jin is hiding somewhere among them. Kinji takes Jin into hiding, locking her in a secret prison used to quarantine Goto members with diseases. Jin will remain caged forever, a prisoner and plaything for Kinji alone. Meanwhile, as the village falls deeper into starvation, the people grow desperate. They decide to raid the one place where food is stored and where they suspect that Jin may be hiding, the Goto home. Anticipating this, Jin sees it as her chance to reignite the war between the Gotos and the villagers. Masamune, searching for Jin at their hideout, is approached by a mysterious figure who delivers a message from her: "Take the village." The next morning, villagers gather outside Masamune's house, ready to attack the Gotos. Yoshimune tries to calm them down, but Masamune interrupts, accusing him of never truly caring for the village. Declaring that Yoshimune's time is over, Masamune rallies the villagers and leads them straight to the Goto home. Just as they approach, a gunshot rings out, killing one of the villagers. Kinji, alerted to the raid, has ordered the Gotos to shoot on sight. The villagers and Gotos engage in a brutal battle, with Masamune encouraging his side forward as the villagers start charging the gunmen. During the chaos, Kurenai attempts to flee but is caught by a villager. A Goto gunman, desperate, returns to Kinji to suggest finding a peaceful solution. But it's too late. The villagers hold Kurenai hostage, demanding food in exchange for her release. Reluctantly, the Gotos agree, delivering barrels of food to the starving villagers. But just as they begin celebrating, another gunshot echoes, and a villager falls to the ground. In their fury, the villagers turn on Kurenai, beating her to death. In the woods, a sniper revealed to be the mysterious man observes the battle and prepares to intervene. As Kinji joins the fray, he fights off several villagers but is eventually surrounded. Suddenly, a new group enters the fight on the Goto's side. Among them, one of the fighters assaults a Goto woman, declaring the need to grow the family. Masamune, watching from a distance, sees the new allies in action as they ask Kinji about Jin's whereabouts. Kinji refuses to tell them, determined to find and kill her himself. 3 of the new allies kill Sada, forcing Kinji to retreat. Desperate, he rushes to Jin's prison and points a gun at her, demanding to know if the child she's carrying is his. When she refuses to answer, he swings at her but collapses, mumbling that he loves her and that the Goto dynasty is doomed. Jin responds coldly, declaring that this is her house now. She reveals that she survived on the mountain thanks to cannibalism, and now he looks just like another meal. The new family enters to find Jin and her child, Shirogane, feasting on Kinji's remains. After the battle, one of the last Goto members, Danjo, arrives at the house, asking for the family. Jin greets him with a chill response. "What do you mean?" "The Goto family is right here," before slitting his throat. She steps outside to find Masamune, asserting that both the Goto family and Kujei village now belong to them. 3 years later, the Gotos have severed ties with the villagers. They continue to provide food but demand that the villagers revive the tradition of sacrificing one person each year during the festival, now dedicating it to a new god, Shirogane. Jin, in a conversation years before, had told Masamune that she would keep Shirogane hidden, fed only on flesh and never allowed to see sunlight. She insists that the ritual must continue without exception. Each year, Shirogane devours a child during the festival and is locked away in his cage by Jin. Masamune struggles to understand why Shirogane doesn't want to leave his prison, and what does he actually see with those eyes of his. He tells Jin that despite the disease killing Shirogane, he knows of a legend of someone who overcame it and became the village's god. Over the years, Jin, growing frail, had trained Kisuke to fend off the descendants of Kinji. That same year, Jin is ambushed by villagers. Just as they close in, they catch a foul smell and flee, thinking a bear is nearby. But it's not a bear. It's Shirogane, who begins to devour Jin. As he bites down on her arm, he cries out, "Mother." Everything Jin had done, creating the new village, battling the Gotos, giving birth to Shirogane, all of it was for love. The scene cuts to Monechika and Kisuke looking over her lifeless body, while Iwayo watches from a distance. In his dying moments, Masamune regrets everything, realizing their actions were a terrible mistake. He pleads for someone to save Shirogane, to free the child. We return to Daigo and Kisuke in the cave with Mashiro and Shirogane. Daigo orders Mashiro to move, but Shirogane rises and, with Mashiro shouting in protest, the volume closes as Daigo calls out to Kisuke for help, but he hesitates, only for Shirogane to take him down. I really like these 3 volumes, but they're definitely not my favorite. It feels like I'm reading a completely different story at this point. The characters haven't really changed much, the dynamic hasn't changed much either, And while it was interesting to see the full backstory of the Gotos, I didn't think it was really necessary. It could have been kept a secret for more of the mystery horror aspect of it, or it could have just been kept simple, and it honestly wouldn't make much of a difference except for the reveal of the old man. It is great to see how Shirogane came to light and the history with Jin and Masamune, but everything else wasn't really that interesting. Stuff about the village starving, different gods, different bloodlines. It is very confusing at first to keep up with the whole family tree and the multiple twists and turns that the series does, but it does feel nice to know that we're at the end game. We're so close to the ending of this series, and I'm very excited to see just how this all ends. There are still stuff that is being built up and hasn't even been revealed or shown yet in these past 3 volumes, so hopefully in the last 2 there actually is some conclusion to those build-up. Kisuke and Daigo are aiming down at Shirogane with rifles. However, Kisuke is haunted by Jin's presence as her ghost lowers his gun. Kisuke shoots Daigo in the arm, giving Shirogane an opportunity to take Daigo down. We cut back to Iwayo holding Munechika's head, keeping him alive to find out where Kisuke is. Masamune claims that he knows where Kisuke is, only he and Munechika know where that place is. In exchange for Munechika's life, he agrees to show Iwayo. They enter the cave and find Kisuke on the ground. Iwayo declares that Kisuke is not a traitor after all. He proclaims that Kisuke will be anointed as the head of the Gotos and that Mashiro will be sacrificed. Suddenly, a Goto member runs in panicking and warns Iwayo that an army of National Guards is surrounding the entire village. The military, along with Ai and the mysterious man, have arrived. A general orders the soldiers to kill on sight without any question, stating that this is not a war, but a punishment for defying the country. Iwayo remains unfazed and insists on continuing the fight. Kisuke rises and looks at Mashiro, announcing that this will be the final ceremony for the Gotos. Mashiro begins to cry as Kisuke reflects on Sumire and their unborn child. Meanwhile, Yuki, walking in the woods, crosses paths with Ai and the mysterious man. Ai reveals that she has only returned to the village to save her son, Kisuke, insisting that he is innocent. Yuki laments her inability to help, but the police officer accompanying her advises her to pray for their safety. As the festival drums echo, Shirogane prepares to eat. A flashback shows the day that Daigo and his family first arrived in the village. During a meal, Daigo asks Mashiro if he can have the rest of her food, but she doesn't respond, and Daigo assumes that she's just upset with him for the incident that led to their move. Yuki interrupts, dismissing Daigo's concerns and declares her desire to live in the village. This brings a smile to Mashiro's face. Back in the present, Daigo awakens to Kisuke, forcing him to eat a piece of meat. Kisuke claims that this is what he's been searching for, that they're all cannibals. In the background, Mashiro is tied up as Shirogane looms over her. Enraged, Daigo watches as Shirogane prepares to take a bite out of Mashiro. However, Mashiro speaks softly, telling him, "Don't cry." Her words stun everyone. Shirogane, overcome with guilt, throws up and reflects on all of his past victims. Kisuke seizes the moment and shoots Shirogane in the head, apologizing for not doing it sooner. A Goto member aims at Kisuke, but Shirogane intervenes, pushing Kisuke's gun aside and asking the members not to kill him. The Goto members are furious, but Iwayo respects Shirogane's final wish. Shirogane then begins to eat his own limbs, consumed by self-loathing. Masamune cries, calling his last moments magnificent, while the Goto members bow to Shirogane's corpse. Mashiro cries out to Shirogane as Kisuke addresses the Goto members. He challenges their beliefs, asking if they truly are the only humans. Shirogane and his father understood their crimes, and his father's last wish was for the Gotos to stop eating human flesh. He argues that fighting to the death is too easy and urges them to let the next generation live of their violent traditions. Iwayo agrees but declares that he must kill Daigo for his crimes. A flashback reveals Iwayo's childhood bond with Kisuke. After Kisuke's mother left, his smile also left, and Iwayo promised to always protect him. And Kisuke promises Iwayo that he will protect the entire family. However, in the present, Iwayo tries to kill Daigo but is stopped when Munechika cuts Daigo's restraints. Enraged, Iwayo attacks but is shot in the arm by Kisuke. Iwayo, disorientated, begins crying blood and loses his memory of Kisuke. The Goto members say that Kisuke is the head of the family, but Iwayo gets angry and tries to charge straight at him. But instead of getting at Kisuke, he goes over to Shirogani's corpse and crushes his head in a fit of rage. Iwayo is tired of the abuse and manipulation from Jin Goto. Human beings are nothing but flesh and bone. Kisuke screams and aims his rifle at him as Masamune gets a glimpse of that man long ago. We flash back to Jin and Masamune after Jin has taken over the village. The Gotos have grown, but all that's missing is the eradication of the festival. Masamune asks where the mothers of the children are, and Jin just laughs at him, saying that she needs to show him something. They walk into the basement where Shirogane is being held, but that's not what she wants to show him. She shows him a cage filled with women who give birth and raise children for the Goto family to grow. One of the women vows to kill one of the kids if Jin doesn't set her free, but Jin knows that she won't kill her own baby. The woman breaks down crying as Masamune decides to run away, saying that this isn't what he wanted to create. Masamune is caught by the man named Iwayo as he asks Masamune if he saw the basement. Jin walks outside and she gets punched in the face by Iwayo. Iwayo says that he's letting Jin live due to a promise that he made. Jin needs Shirogane to lead the village, but Iwayo turns to Masamune to ask if he believes in a god. Iwayo grabbed his face and says that all there is in life is food and meat. Killing is our instinct. Kisuke aims his rifle at Iwayo, but Iwayo punches him and turns to the Goto members, forcing one of them to eat human flesh. A flashback shows Jin revealing to Kisuke that the Gotos consume human flesh, but Kinji's family used to hunt down people in the mountains like livestock. The reason Jin was able to survive the mountains was because she gave them a spot to live in the village. The current Goto family is a descendant of Kinji's family, and whenever they eat human flesh, they remember their true nature. As the Goto members devour Shirogani's corpse, they awaken their primal instincts. The scene shifts to chaos as Iwayo leads an attack on Daigo, who struggles to free Mashiro. Kisuke urges Daigo to save his daughter and begins to fight back the Goto members. As the volume ends, Kisuke begins to think about Sumire as he believes this is his last moment. However, Daigo approaches Kisuke, reassuring him that he won't die yet because there are still people waiting for his return. I and the mysterious man stand with the general, discussing whether to keep the escalating battle private. Unfortunately, the conflict has spiraled out of control, catching the media's attention. I is visibly distressed, worrying about Kisuke's fate. Yuki walks in though, declaring that Kisuke isn't alone and that she won't leave until Daigo returns. Meanwhile, Daigo and Kisuke fend off the attacking Goto family members, with Munechika shielding Mashiro. Iwayo ambushes Kisuke, but Daigo intercepts him, throwing himself into the fray. Iwayo quickly turns his fury on Munechika, landing a devastating punch as Kisuke catches Mashiro in his arms. Daigo retaliates by headbutting Iwayo but is subdued by the family members. He screams for Kisuke to run with Mashiro, but Kisuke hesitates. Finding strength, Kisuke grabs Mashiro and escapes the cave. As he runs, memories of his mother and Sumire surface. He's ambushed by villagers armed with pickaxes. Despite being overwhelmed though, Kisuke shields Mashiro. She slips from his grasp and runs to Yuki, crying into her arms saying, "Save him." Behind Yuki are police officers raising their guns, holding the villagers at bay. As Mashiro cries in Yuki's arms, Kisuke looks up to see Sumire. With tears streaming, she embraces him. Ai and the mysterious man arrive as Ai breaks down in relief, knowing that her son is finally safe. Yet, there's still one more person left to save. The police tend to Kisuke's injuries as the captain introduces him to his mother. Ai, overwhelmed with emotions, breaks down on the ground. Kisuke then thanks the mysterious man for sticking by her side. Determined to save Daigo, Kisuke rallies the officers and heads back to the cave, only for a police officer to spot a couple of flames rising from the woods. Inside the cave, Daigo fights Iwayo with all of his strength but is overpowered. Iwayo suddenly then takes a bullet to the head. Masamune stands there at the entrance, rifle in hand. Iwayo charges at him but gets shot point blank in the face. His body begins twitching unnaturally, cells moving as if he's alive, desperately wanting to consume flesh. Masamune is stricken by flashbacks of the mountain gojos and he collapses in terror, asking how long do they want to make him suffer. Iwayo bites Daigo's arms but Daigo reverses it and puts him in a headlock. Daigo tells Iwayo to stop looking at the past and focus on the current generation. Iwayo then falls silent, his final words being, "Kisuke." Masamune chuckles darkly, thanking Daigo for ending his suffering, but Daigo tells him to shut up or he'll kill him. It's not over yet. The villagers are seen burning down the Goto house as Daigo explains that the villagers will get their revenge on the Gotos, and if it's not prevented, then the curse will never end. Masamune knew that this would happen though a very long time ago. Either the Gotos or the villagers, one of the two must be destroyed. The Gotos arrive and begin fighting off the villagers, with elders and even the wounded fighting back. They stood up and rebelled due to the presence of the bridge of Kuge village. Daigo silences him with a punch as Munechika begs for him to not kill him. As Masamune lies bloody on the ground, Daigo leaves the cave and Masamune begins to think about everything that Jin built has finally burned down to the ground. He tells his son Munechika to leave him, but he just can't do it. Masamune is then killed and devoured by 5 Goto members. The police arrive at the cave, looking down at Masamune's ripped up corpse. Kisuke looms over Iwayo's corpse as they try to find Daigo and Munechika. Kisuke thinks he knows where Daigo might be. Daigo is shown running towards the village to stop all of the fighting. We cut to the village where one of the villagers is trying to kill 2 kids. Daigo then steps in and stops him. The villager curses him out, saying that he doesn't know what he's a part of, calling him an outsider. Daigo doesn't argue though. He's just a police officer doing his duty. The child grabs a gun and aims it at Daigo, manipulated by Jin's lingering presence. Just before he fires though, his older brother embraces him. As the violence subdues, Kisuke and the officers arrive to break up the chaos. Kisuke recalls Jin's teachings. The name of Kuge village was derived from noble or offering, due to the village starting off as small and peaceful until a group of bandits came in and imprisoned the nobles, making the villagers that we see today. From that point on, the Gotos were tasked with leading the village out of darkness by becoming stronger than them. Killing each other had become ingrained in the blood of the Kuge villagers, but Kisuke couldn't bear it and wanted to put an end to the violence. The child loses control and begins shooting into the air. Kisuke and the police storm in, trying to break up the chaos between the villagers and the Gotos. Amid the turmoil, a flashback shows a younger Kisuke standing up to Jin, arguing that the fighting was unnecessary and that flowers should be offered to everyone, both Goto family members and villagers alike. Despite many casualties, the children ultimately break free from the curse and lose that bloodlust. The police arrest all of the suspects, signaling that the war is over. However, Daigo is still missing, but Kisuke knows where he will go. We see Daigo reuniting with Yuki and Mashiro. They leap into his arms, embracing him so tightly that they all tumble to the ground. Daigo jokes that they're crushing him, but adds with a grin that he's grateful that his wife has giant breasts. He turns to Mashiro saying that he's proud of her strength, saying that she's even stronger than him. Daigo envisions a bright future for both her and her children, bringing everyone around them to tears of joy. News spreads of Japan's most tragic incident since the war, the Kuge case, with a devastating total of 86 deaths. The world has learned of the village's dark history. Yusuke stands in the village's ruins, questioning whether his actions were right or wrong. He feels lost, unsure of how to move forward. Kisuke encourages him to keep on living and to reflect on his choices, ensuring history doesn't repeat itself. Later, Daigo is seen in his police uniform being saluted by his comrades. He rides his bike through the village, receiving warm greetings from the remaining villagers. Eventually, he arrives at the Goto home in ruins, where Kisuke waits inside. Kisuke admits that this will be the last time that they will ever see each other, acknowledging his crimes and his need to atone for them. Daigo, understanding, asks Kisuke to hold his baby tight when he finally regains his freedom. They share a heartfelt goodbye before Kisuke is taken away in handcuffs. Yusuke is inside muttering, Why is everyone acting like everything is over? Yuki and Mashiro are seen packing their belongings. While sorting through a room, Mashiro discovers something. Meanwhile, police investigate the Goto basement, finding engravings on the bars of the cages. The engravings say, "Run." But run from who? Yusuke recalls Kano's ominous warning. The people who live in Kuge village are cannibals. Not just the Goto family, but the entire village. Mashiro examines the carving, which reads, "Run, fools." As she brushes her fingers across it, she accidentally cuts herself. Without thinking, she licks the blood from her finger. Yusuke says nothing has changed, but Daigo disagrees, insisting that he still has a role to fulfill in the village. The series then ends with an old woman chewing on something. As the camera pans closer, it's revealed to be a human finger. When it comes to the endings of horror manga, I usually keep my expectations low. And while I really did enjoy these last 2 volumes, it did come with a couple of flaws. The first thing is the amount of extra lore dumping we literally get at the end of the series. It's fine introducing more world building at around the ending of a series, but not at the last volume. Especially since we just had 2 whole volumes of lore dumping and flashbacks. Most of the things added could have been revealed there, and these volumes could have been focused more on the actual war going on. The second thing is the bloodline thing about the Gotos going berserk after eating human flesh. If that's true, then why doesn't Iwayo or the other Goto members go berserk when they eat human flesh in the beginning of the series? Or are they just different versions of the Goto family? But aren't they still blood related at the end of the day, so why does it matter? Also, the plot armor was already insane with Shirogane literally surviving shots to the head, but now we have Iwayo literally fighting Daigo without his whole frontal lobe and a giant hole in his head. The reason I like this series a lot is because it seemed a lot more realistic and down to earth compared to most series. Yeah, it deals with cannibalistic giants, but still, I think that something like that could happen in the real world, and it may even be real with the amount of cannibalism that we see in today's society. It took me off the series a little bit, but at the end of the day, I still really like this ending. I love the trying to build up the next generation goal that both Daigo and Kisuke have, even if it is like last minute for them. It is a nice parallel to see how Masamune and Jin wanted to fix the next generation of the village, except both have different visions of what that looks like. Even though I like the ending, I can see why a lot of people wouldn't, especially with the ambiguous, well, the job ain't over yet type of ending. The Mashiro cliffhanger could mean that she could become a cannibal too, which basically means that Daigo and Kisuke did all of that for nothing, since the curse would just repeat itself. Plus, the reveal that they still haven't done anything about the villagers being cannibals could mean a sequel is on the way, or they just didn't really know how to really solve that issue. I like the ending, but I hope that they don't make a sequel just to rewrite this ending. Gannibal as a whole was such a special experience in my life though. It was so fun and exciting to learn more about this mystery. To me, it was a cop mystery drama about cannibals, and slowly it just turned into a whole bloodline war and rescue mission, which is really good. The series developed really well, with the whole festival being built up for 10 whole volumes, literally building up to the finale. I loved a majority of the characters shown, but I'm glad that a lot of them played big roles in the history and story of not just the village, but also the horrible traditions of the village. The only complaint I really had with the whole series was the amount of flashbacks and lore dumping in the middle of volumes and chapters. A lot of it really put a pause on the major moments in the story. Not just that, but the series would be really hard to understand with the large amount of characters and family trees being introduced, and events being added into the middle of other important historical parts as well. The whole timeline of the series is very difficult to piece together if you don't read the whole thing on your own like multiple times. Honestly, if you guys want a video on the entire timeline of Gannibal, I wouldn't mind doing that either. Not a lot of stones were left unturned though, but with an ambiguous ending like that, it just gave us a lot more questions in our heads. It does seem that the mangaka wants to leave it open for maybe a potential volume 14 or a sequel later in the future, kind of like a Starving Anonymous reroute, but I don't think we should get a sequel or an extra volume, but if one does come out, I would definitely review it. It's just a weird feeling to have reading and translating an entire series in the past 4 months for it to finally be over. I'm happy that I was able to cover it and show the world how much we actually care about this series. With the live action show being popular as well, I really hope that this leads to maybe an anime adaptation or for all of the volumes to finally be translated into English. But at the end of the day, this series will always have a special place in my heart, and hopefully it does in yours too. But thank you guys for watching this video. 4 months of reading and translating all put to an end with this massive project. I hope you guys enjoyed this series, and remember to join our Discord server. The link will be in the description below. And if you want more horror manga content like this one, then why not scroll down and hit that subscribe button. But Merry Christmas guys, and I'll be seeing you in the next video.